Either ethics makes no sense at all, or this is what it means and has nothing else to say. Not to be unworthy of what happens to us. Gilet de Luz, the logic of sense. Part 5 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure perfectly encapsulates this quote, proving that the means create the end. Giorno Giovana achieves his dream of becoming a gangstar, not through sacrifice, but instead through the long, arduous road of righteous actions and inspiration. This is how Vento Aureo firmly establishes JoJo's soul. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a show that hides its meaningful and brilliant themes behind the ridiculous scenarios and over-the-top character designs that we all know and love. Vento Aureo happens to be the part of JoJo's that I feel best encapsulates this principle, with a philosophically rich and deep story being hidden behind Araki's famous Enemy of the Week structure. Part 5 takes De Luz's ethics and tests it against a common pop ethic, the Machiavellian quote that the ends justify the means, as well as how the means and ends relate to our agency within fate. The story establishes that it's the means by which Passione undertakes their journey that brings about their rise to become the leaders of the Mafia and makes their inevitable suffering worthwhile. Rather than the common idea of the ends justifying the means, Giorno and the Passione crew show that only the means can justify the ends. Each member of Passione is marked in some way that disenfranchise them from society, whether that be through loss, neglect, betrayal, or injustice. Giorno was isolated and emotionally neglected. Bucciarati was thrust into the criminal underworld to defend his father. Abbacchio let his former partner die. Mista's self-defense was unjustly deemed murder. Narancia was framed for a crime he didn't commit. Fugo was assaulted by a mentor, and Trish had her father attempt an incredibly late form of birth control. Despite having these terribly unfortunate events cut their opportunities in life short, all 7 members of Passione don't let that erode away their authentic wills towards justice. And while they do operate within the criminal underworld and commit crimes, they have their own code of morality that keeps them from stooping to the level of La Squadra, the boss's bodyguards, and the boss himself. Vento Aureo isn't a story about being 100% pure like all the previous JoJo's parts, but one about staying true to your sense of justice in a corrupt and evil world. Vento Aureo opens by introducing the famous most boring JoJo. Spoiler alert, he's not. Giorno Giovana. His morally gray nature is established in his initial interactions with some random people in Naples, retrieving a girl's wallet from a pickpocket, but then taking some of her money as payment to buy a kid gelato. Giorno is the child of both Jonathan and Dio, so his morality ends up being a bit darker than the previous JoJo's, with him being more ambitious, mischievous, and a bit more vengeful, while retaining the same Joestar heart of justice underneath all of that. When Giorno was a child, he nearly went down a similar misanthropic path to his father Dio, but after choosing to help a high-ranking mafia member, he was looked out for, and his life was massively improved to thank him for his assistance. Giorno observed his new friend and noticed that the mysterious mafia man made great efforts to make decisions and face the consequences of his choices. It was this ironic figure that taught Giorno about staying true to your commitments and beliefs, and, ultimately, in the goodness of humanity. Giorno embodies the part's core claim: method matters. The ambition he inherited from Dio, plus Jonathan's conscience, make a means-first philosophy feel inevitable. This dualist lineage makes Giorno a continuation of Part 1's theme of fate, inextricably combining Jonathan and Dio's personal philosophies to create a morally gray an active force of change that seeks to do good. Even his stand, Gold Experience, has all of its abilities rooted in life-giving, whether it be its ability to supercharge life or to make inanimate objects into living things. His stand reflects how Giorno is someone who is attuned with the sheer energy of life. Giorno's ability to create life and life energy isn't just limited to his stand. He closely adheres to what he almost subtly believes to be the proper way of life to pursue righteous actions and achieve righteous goals. And this enables Giorno to gain the undying trust of the members of Passione through empowering the people he works with to act to their full moral potential. When Giorno first encounters Bucciarati, they are on pretty bad terms, seeing as Bucciarati was sent to kill him for what Giorno did to leaky-eyed Luca. But Giorno shows his resolve and compassion during their fight after tearing off his own arm to win it and deciding to spare Bucciarati because he recognized him as a good person after a child's drug use floored him. Bruno tries to object to Giorno's monologuing about his plans for the future, but soon recognizes that Giorno is somebody who, like him, cares for people and has the willpower and drive necessary to see his noble dream through and improve the lives of everyone in Naples. But Bruno isn't yet willing to entirely betray the boss despite his own internal conflict. What he does know is that he'll bet on the chance to end the drug trade that he despises so much. In this very moment, Bruno is able to begin acting accordingly to his own principles, and as he continues to bet on Giorno's dream, he'll continue to overcome any obstacle standing in his way, because a man with a why can endure any how. But not everyone is so easily inspired. After Giorno formally is inducted into the hallowed halls of Passione, he is formally introduced to the entirety of Bucciarati's group. Most of them immediately take a liking to Giorno's spunk after he drinks piss. But Abbacchio remains irritated at his plucky optimism, and Abbacchio's feeling of antagonism reaches its zenith in the soft machine and man in the mirror fights, where Giorno constantly insists on proving himself and refuses to take shortcuts to guarantee results. In this way, Abbacchio acts as a foil to Giorno's ethos of actions, because he himself had lost his way as a police officer when he led his partner to his death when he took dirty money. Because of this, Abbacchio seems to resent Giorno for representing the same immutable spirit of actionable justice that he had represented when he himself was younger. Giorno continually irritates Abbacchio by acting in righteous ways because it reminds Abbacchio of his own failure to live up to his desire for justice when his partner died by his own actions. And while Abbacchio continues to stew in his own misery, he is eventually able to let go of his past wounds and trust in justice once more later on in the story. Giorno's noble ambitions to chase his dream without making unnecessary sacrifices is one of the driving forces of Bruno's squad in Part 5. This very philosophy is what separates Bucciarati's squad from the rest of the members of Passione, scrambling for power, influence, and revenge throughout all of Vento Aureo. Enemies like Polpo and La Squadra are unscrupulous when it comes to harming others, when it comes to pursuing their goals. And this philosophy has all of them taking the shortest possible path to their objective. And while they may have resolve and a drive to succeed within the gang, or to avenge those that they care about, they are ultimately just criminals scrounging for a shred of power. Giorno and Bruno, by contrast, won't sacrifice innocents or their allies to achieve their goals. Giorno refuses to abandon Fugo in the fight against Deluso because he knew it would be a needless sacrifice. Bucciarati was willing to sacrifice himself to eliminate Prosciutto in the Grateful Dead arc, showing that he himself is willing to do what needs to be done to see his dream through. La Squadra as a whole perfectly shows what sets Giorno and Bucciarati's squad apart from the rest of Passione. La Squadra is willing to sacrifice their lives and well-being to achieve their grander goals of taking over the drug route and getting revenge on the boss. But they are limited by being a reactive force in a Deleuzian sense. When it comes to ethical movements, Deleuze writes about active and reactive ethical forces. And to put it simply, active forces are creative and reactive forces are based out of resentment. La Squadra moves from resentment. Giorno's crew moves from creation, the desire to create a free world without the drug trade. Resentment reacts to what is. Creation creates what isn't, and fate favors creators. In Giorno and Bucciarati's case, to create a better mafia that actually defends the people of Naples. All this is perfectly exemplified when Giorno ends up showing Mista that resolve doesn't merely require the will to sacrifice, but the will to persist and fight through the darkness to see a path to something greater. In this way, the actions of Giorno and Bucciarati inspire the squad to be better in pursuit of a better Italy once it's freed of the boss's seedy influence. After continuing to affirm their position of acting righteously within the gang, Bucciarati finally makes it to Venice to safely deliver Trish to the boss. However, Diavolo reveals the brutality of his nature in both his attempt to kill Trish and in revealing his stand, King Crimson's ability. Diavolo's philosophy is pure outcome. King Crimson erases the stretch of time he dislikes, the how, and keeps only the result, a pure encapsulation of consequentialism. Even the limits of King Crimson's power expose the flaw in Diavolo's worldview. He can only see a few seconds into the future, never beyond the immediate consequences. Epitaph's vision is as short-sighted as Diavolo's own philosophy. Consequentialism, by its nature, obsesses over results it can measure, not growth that requires patience, risk, and faith. Giorno, by contrast, always fights to find the arduous and righteous path through the darkness. His means are his morality. Gold experience represents the opposite of Diavolo's metaphysics. With gold experience, Giorno fills time with life, potential, and inspiration. Where Diavolo tries to control fate by skipping time, Giorno embraces it and becomes worthy of whatever it brings. When Bruno realizes that Diavolo would go as far as sacrificing his own daughter to reach his desired result of untouchable anonymity, Bucciarati decides to completely reject his formerly beloved boss, because Bucciarati knows that Diavolo is a leader that he can never again follow in good conscience. When Bucciarati chooses Trish over orders, Diavolo can predict outcomes, but not convictions. He reads results, but he's completely blind to the resolve that drives those actions. After fighting Diavolo for a bit, Bucciarati dies. And it's Bucciarati's death right here that is one of the key moments in understanding the overarching themes of the narrative that are revealed in the Rolling Stones arc. Bruno's squad has to go investigate a sculptor who's related to the death of a local young woman. The sculptor ends up having a stand called the Rolling Stones that foresees one's fate and will peacefully kill people so that they can avoid strenuous and painful deaths. It rightly predicts that Bucciarati is going to die, and Mista realizes that he has to stop the stone from reaching Bucciarati to save his life. Mista almost sacrifices his life to stop the stone, and it ends up shattering to depict Narancia and Abbacchio dying as well. It's through this resolve that the sculptor ends up realizing that the same determination and bravery that led Mista to jump off a building to stop the Rolling Stones could also recontextualize fate to lead to greater meaning, but would also create a more violent and difficult path for everyone in the gang. This arc embodies Deleuze's ethics. Mista's leap affirms the event of fate, transforming passive death into active meaning. It's like Deleuze says in his work, The Logic of Sense, ethics is about affirming what happened, not resenting it. Passione does this by turning suffering into purpose. Without Giorno inspiring Bucciarati to live up to his own ideals, and the persistence and drive of Bucciarati's crew, Bucciarati would have simply died in Venice. And that would have been the end of the story. But, as Nietzsche famously says, a man with the why can endure any how. There was something yet to achieve. Bucciarati's soul is too driven with righteous motivation to die just yet, and he pushes onward to end the boss's corrupt power over Italy. While Bucciarati's fate was to die in Venice, the inspiration, persistence, and willpower the group caused him to push beyond that fate to achieve something great, even if the path they were set upon became a lot more difficult. Bucciarati and Giorno explain to the squad that they'll be betraying the organization to end Diavolo's corruption, and most of the members make a choice to follow Bucciarati on this treacherous and ambitious path. All but Fugo. And Fugo's refusal to join the rest of his friends in betraying the organization reveals that sometimes ambitious and brave decisions to change a flawed system betray rationality itself. There has to be a sort of suspension of common ethical sense to betray an organization that you swore loyalty to try and change it in your own image. Rationality would leave you asking, who's to say that you should do that? Who's to say that you'll be able to? And by sticking to rationality, a part of Fugo's soul almost dies when he stays left behind in Venice, effectively removing him from the story. While Fugo might have failed himself in staying behind, Abbacchio powerfully decided to bet on his newly rediscovered sense of justice, showing a glimmer of hope for his own redemption. After everyone but Fugo takes a leap of faith to betray the boss after finding out about his actions and finding out their reasons to fight, they set out on an impossible mission to bring down a Crimson King that rules over time itself. It's through the righteous goal of toppling an unscrupulous leader that Abbacchio finally finds his redemption. When the team reaches Sardinia, Abbacchio is assassinated by Diavolo, while he was in the process of creating the boss's face through rewinding Moody Blues. We get a glimpse into the afterlife, where Abbacchio has an experience that only reaffirms everything the team has done, and finally provides him closure in life after living with the abject misery of failing to be the person he set out to be when he first became a cop. Abbacchio encounters a police officer doing his job to gather evidence, even though it seems like a lost cause, and Abbacchio can't seem to grasp what the point in continuing this action is. The officer simply responds that he's not after the result. When you chase a result, you end up losing sight of justice, and that, at the end of the day, what's most important is always having that will to find truth and justice. Abbacchio thinks back to his mistakes in staying the course, and laments that he's a failure. It's then when Abbacchio is told that he did well by his former partner, that he couldn't forgive himself for failing. In this way, Abbacchio is finally able to forgive himself and is offered release from his inner torment as he believes in justice once more. After leaving Sardinia, the rest of the crew continues to survive the onslaught of the boss's personal guard to reach the Colosseum in Rome for a slim chance to conquer the boss's unbeatable ability. The crew ends up discovering the Requiem arrow's power after Polnareff creates Silver Chariot Requiem as a last-ditch effort to keep the arrow away from Diavolo. The power of Requiem is something interesting because normally stand abilities are limited to have an effect on the material world, but Requiem stand abilities are so terrifying in that they control human consciousness that underlies all perception and lived experience. In this way, those with a Requiem ability can essentially have absolute dominion over people through controlling their very souls. Silver Chariot Requiem runs berserk and switches souls with no particular purpose other than to cause chaos in service of protecting the arrow. In a Deleuzian sense, Silver Chariot Requiem disrupts sense, that which acts as a boundary between chaotic events and stable meanings. When everyone finds themselves inside a new body or identity, it's in this moment of abject chaos that the characters are forced to affirm their identities when they are forcibly removed from their common sensibility of what they themselves are. And in another sense, a requiem is a song that allows the dead to rest in the Roman Catholic Church. And in the case of the Requiem arrow, it seems to activate it is to almost fulfill the latent desires of the dead, their lives to pursue a difficult path. Polnareff is able to activate Silver Chariot Requiem because of the Stardust Crusaders' will to stop the evil of Dio and the arrow's influence. And ultimately, in the scramble for the arrow, Giorno receives it in a very similar way. During the fight for the arrow, it seems like Diavolo got the upper hand and might actually retrieve the arrow, when suddenly he's stopped by everyone's souls once again moving through a weakening of Silver Chariot's power. Surprisingly, it's caused by Bucciarati, who intends to completely destroy Silver Chariot Requiem, even though it would mean his certain death, because he doesn't have a body to return to. Bucciarati's sacrifice is something Diavolo couldn't anticipate. He sees results, but never the desires that give rise to them. Diavolo pleads with Bucciarati to give it up and let him have the arrow, imploring Bucciarati to think about who is deserving of the arrow, who is deserving to be king. But Bucciarati knows the answer to his question, and it's that Diavolo is not deserving of such power and sacrifices his life to give Giorno that power. Before Bucciarati's soul departs, he tells Giorno just how much he inspired him, in saying that he was doomed to die, but through Giorno's inspiration, his soul was reborn and had a renewed sense of justice. Giorno's ambition, nobility, and actions are ultimately what gave Bucciarati the strength to act against the boss and to persist even after he was dead, and without the actions of Giorno, Bucciarati would have died a meaningless and depressing death, serving Diavolo. Although Bucciarati's fate was always to die, it became something meaningful, where he was able to live his life to his fullest and was finally able to make his dreams of creating a better Naples a reality. Bucciarati's soul gives Giorno the arrow, symbolically illustrating that the resolve and sacrifices of Bucciarati's team is what brought Giorno to the point of reaching the arrow. Then, Giorno's gold experience evolves into Gold Experience Requiem, where he fittingly defeats Diavolo by placing him in an infinite death loop, where he can never reach the ultimate end of his death. The punishment is literally the harshest thing ever, but it's the best punishment for Diavolo. Just as Diavolo constantly skipped the means with which to achieve his desired ends, he'll now never be able to reach any end ever again. Giorno's character completely exposes Diavolo for the false leader that he is, and shows that the ends really don't justify the means, because Passion is able to overthrow Diavolo through perseverance and sacrifices. The deaths of Abbacchio, Narancia, and Bruno are the means by which Giorno is able to ever get the arrow in the first place. In the final scene of Vento Aureo, Giorno is finally shown to be at the apex of the Mafia, as its boss with Mista as his right hand. Mista opens up a window, showing the metaphorical winds of change, blowing into the Mafia, rejuvenating it, leading to a brighter future. To return to Deleuze's quote, Giorno, Bucciarati, Abbacchio, Mista, Narancia, and Trish all ultimately live up to this Deleuzian standard by continually confronting their fates that were passively dealt to them with resolve and strength. All so that their actions could take the meaningless fate of death assigned to Bucciarati and could ride the golden wind of change to create something profoundly meaningful. Vento Aureo asks, what if fate isn't just a curse, but a challenge to prove your worth? And how can we take the unfortunate cards that fate dealt to us in life and turn them into meaningful events that drive life's changes? Man, what an amazing narrative.